Hi, I'm Patty Sandoval. I'm the call center director at Davis Law Firm. If you ever have any questions, please call us. We're open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Patricia Barbee. I'm an immigration attorney at Davis Law Firm. I'm here for the screening of State of Arizona, and I'll be on the panel afterward to discuss any immigration questions you have. Thank you.
I'd like to, Jesus has a microphone here, and we really want to hear from you all. I want your questions and your comments. We have a lawyer, we have educators, we have a reporter, we have people up here that can answer our questions, and I want to open the floor because I know you all have questions. I know there's a dialogue out there that somebody out here wants to start. I know there's several familiar faces in the community. Does anybody want to go first, or should we continue speaking? Because I want to know what we feel, what this film is going to help us do as a community. What are first steps, or what can people do? And you all have touched on the fact that there are organizations out there. And let's start with you, Patricia. How do you think somebody who feels strongly on one side of the fence, what should they do and where can they go? And
someone who is hoping to immigrate and go through the process as it stands right now,
sure,
that you're referring to? Well, they talked a lot in the movie about people who have been here 15 or 20 years and have no options, but they may have more options than they think, as we were discussing. And one thing they also mentioned in the film, that people don't want to report crime because they're afraid that they themselves will be arrested or somehow put into the system. But Congress actually created a special visa for immigrant communities who, for that very reason, would not report a crime if they're helpful to authorities in either arresting. It doesn't have to lead to a jail sentence or anything like that, but just if they're helpful to authorities in looking into this crime, they can receive a visa that will eventually lead to a green card and citizenship, and it can include their families. And that's a question we try to ask everyone that comes in our office who may not have any other avenue through family to apply, to become a permanent resident. Have you ever been a victim of a crime? It's the only time when you'd be happy to hear yes, because then that may lead to other avenues for them. So that's just one thing that doesn't seem so obvious that may be able to help people.
Excellent. And Jason, you do bring a different perspective, you're right, as a reporter, because you see everything that we saw here on the film are things that happened in Arizona, but you see this every day and you report on it every day. What are the stories here locally that you see, and how can you relate that to our community?
Well, one thing is I don't think this would ever happen in Texas. Sanctuary cities was in the 2011 legislature, where they were going to make a law that would basically keep police chiefs and sheriffs from directing their officers not to ask for immigration status. And the Republican leadership basically saw evangelical leaders and business leaders lining up with the Democrats on that one, and it never made it out of committee after having built up quite a bit of momentum. So I find it very hard to imagine a situation in which something like this. In fact, I kind of laughed when they showed the some of the follow-up legislation, the letter from all the business leaders, because that was exactly what happened in the run-up to the committee hearings on the sanctuary cities legislation here in Texas. The statewide business leaders came down very hard, saying this was not something they wanted to be passed in Texas. And it didn't make its way out of committee. In 2011, immigration was all the talk in the legislative session, and this year it was barely mentioned. Focused on completely different things. So it's difficult to see something like that happening here in Texas. That said, we still deal with a dysfunctional immigration system. The same issues that drive that sort of legislation still exist here. And there's always sort of talk about getting in line, doing it the right way, but as I'm sure our attorney can tell us, once you're here illegally over a year, your options are pretty much done. There are long waits for a lot of visas, and so that's something everywhere in the country's dealing with right now. And they talked about the border security as well, which we're fairly close to the border. The Express News covers large swaths of South Texas, and when you get into the cities, when you start looking at the homicide rates in a lot of the border cities, there's not this crazy violence that they're talking about. I don't don't think.
I can attest
Yeah.
to that.
I used to live in Laredo, and they usually do like 10 homicides a year in a city of 250,000. I don't think they're even close to that.
We've
this
had
year.
3.
3 in a city of 250,000. I mean, that's.
It's a little more than that when you count the illegals.
I think we do have one question.
I do. Hi, thank you guys for being here today. I had followed the story a little bit of course, with Arizona, but did not know the detail and the extent of exactly everything that was going on. They mentioned that there were a lot of states that tried to enforce similar laws, some even tougher than Arizona. Just asking because you guys would know this more than I would before I go to Google. What were some of the, did any of those pass even close to what Arizona had? Is there stuff going on in other states that I did not know about that's similar to this?
I'd like to defer to the lawyer.
I was going to defer to the journalist.
Oklahoma and I think Alabama passed some pretty restrictive.
ones.
Yeah, very restrictive. I think Alabama's was more restrictive than Arizona's.
I was surprised to see so many states pop up that I didn't even realize would have been on there.
I think that's just from a personal perspective, I think that is an indication of how the ultra-conservative right is trying to spread their tentacles across the country to try to gain some sort of momentum for, presidential election coming up and doing all those things. I think it's a political movement, as it was indicated in the video. I mean, in the movie, because that's trying to enforce something that's not there yet. And I will, Jason, just to follow up on your comment about the legislature. I know there was talk in this last session. Texas residents, even though they're not U.S. citizens, have an opportunity to gain financial aid through the state, not through the federal government, but through the state. And there was talk about the possibility of repealing that and doing away with that law. And any more word? Have you heard anything?
I mean, it didn't pass that.
No, I know it didn't, but as
I
we
mean,
rev up for the next one.
I don't know what's going to happen in the next session. It's going to be, it's becoming a campaign issue right now in the lieutenant governor's race. Who voted for that law? Many. What was it? Like 2001, I think, was that when that law was passed.
Mm-hmm.
So people running for lieutenant governor right now were in the legislature at that time. So that particular law is coming up again, and I'd imagine it will be, if Rick Perry runs for for president, it will be an issue during the presidential campaign.
If you're interested, it's House Bill 1403, and it was passed in 2001.
Yeah. So I mean that particular piece of legislation could come up again.
Thank you. We do have another question, sir.
Yes, I watched the whole movie and I was just it was kind of astounding the way I saw the 2 African American women standing up for the Latino, and I just kind of feel like they felt the same way that the Latinos feel as far as like the civil rights movement and everything that they've been through, the slavery and everything like that, and the way they want to push the Latinos out with the immigration and everything like that out of their, out of the United States. So it just feels, real good. Just they're standing up for the Latinos and being united, and that's all.
Excellent. Yeah.
It's an interesting comment because I agree with you. And living on the border, I grew up in Laredo, and I was gone for about 10 years working, and but I went to live in Far Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. So I've been on the border all my life, and during the height of some of this immigration discussions and how they tried to really sensationalize the violence of the Rio Grande border region. I live in Laredo. I've lived there all my life. My whole family's been there. We have a little ranch in San Ignacio, Texas, which is on the border. And is there crime in Nuevo Laredo? Yes. Everybody knows that. Are there drugs coming through the checkpoints? Absolutely, because there's a huge demand for them in this country. Is there violence? Yeah, there's violence, but there's violence in Budapest, and there's violence in Germany, and there's violence everywhere. But we, and I say we, Laredenses, were somewhat discriminated against by even other areas of this country, saying, well, you all on the border are the ones that have all this violence going on, and it really wasn't true. All of those late night talk shows that talked about the horrible violence in the Rio Grande region talked about this stuff, and I kept saying, well, they've never been down here. How do they know? If you've never been to Falfurrias, if you've never been to Laredo, if you've never been to El Paso, how do you know? And I find it fascinating that people make laws and rules about how we live in places that they've never even visited.
You know, and just to piggyback on what you said, and you saw it in the film, how Mexicanos primarily are vilified as being, you know, and unfairly drug smugglers, terrorists even, you know, child molesters. You even heard that. I'm like, come on, man. You know, just heaping, you know, all this criminal activity when the great majority of people are just coming over here to try to, you know, have a better life, make a living for them and for their families, you know. Yes, there's going to be that percentage. And the carteles over there, well, they're very organized, you know, and those are the ones that are really, you know, doing those horrible murders, because it's, you know, billions and billions of dollars of business. As long as the biggest consumer in the world of drugs here in the U.S. is going to be buying these billions and billions, there's going to be people to supply them, just as you said, and that's where the violence comes from. You know, that needs to be addressed. It's not the immigrants that are doing that for the most part.
Very good. Thank you. We have a question.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to say thank you for having this. I mean, I think you know, you do hear about it in Texas, but unless you see it and experience it, you don't understand the extent to it. And you know, it was just scary. You know, it seemed like, for me, it seemed like a witch hunt, like concentration camps that we were, the little detention camps we had in the United States during World War II. People were afraid, people were scared, and you know, they were looking for a villain. It seemed like it was, you know, Hispanics, Mexican Americans, or you know, illegal immigrants. And we know we do have, you know, it's like people, you know, people are bad. You know, some are Hispanics, and I think, you know, a lot of us take the brunt for that. But I think my question is what kind of, I mean, I know I work in healthcare, so I mean, family, if you know, when you go see a patient, if it's not family, you don't have a lot of rights. So what? Let's say, you know, you're one of your coworkers or a friend, you know, gets deported. What kind of action can they take to help, you know, their friends or, you know, sometimes, you know, secondary family, you know, deal with the situation? What kind of action can they take?
Well, first, the important thing is to know whether someone is actually deported. They don't even use the term deport anymore in immigration court. It's called a removal. And there are different things, like they talked about the expedited removal that the gentleman had. That's usually someone coming across at the border who's using false documents, or you know, something that escalates it beyond just trying to sneak in or go across the river. It's something that brings them to the attention of the people at the border who feel that they need a higher punishment for what they're trying to do. So I don't know what this gentleman did. I mean, it's not always because you're using false documents, but that's generally when I see it. Also, if somebody is picked up, caught just coming in on this side and sent back, they can just sign and leave. That's called a voluntary return. That doesn't really affect your immigration possibilities. You can still, it doesn't carry the weight of a deportation. This gentleman in the movie, where they said he was released for humanitarian reasons, he had the expedited removal. And if you have that and you come back and you're picked up again here, it turns into an open order removal, and they can take you out the minute they find you again. But there's something called a stay of removal. You have to act quickly. You have to have somebody who knows what they're doing when they put the package together. But like, this gentleman's an excellent candidate because I'm guessing his son is a U.S. citizen. He probably pays taxes. He owns a home. He has property. Basically, when you sorry, I lost my train of thought. When you can show to the government, I know I have an order of removal, and you've got a lot of people on your list that you want to remove, and most of them are worse than me. Look at all the good things that I have on my side. Also, if they're caring for family members who are ill or they're a sole support. Say that again?
Small business?
yeah, all these things are, things in their favor that make them somebody that we would like to keep here. So a lot of the times ICE will consider that and say, okay, you're right, we're going to let you stay here. Sometimes that can even come with a work permit. It's not forever, but there's no reason to halt it, so you can keep renewing every couple of years.
Excellent. Question?
Yes, I just wanted to make a brief statement. I thought that the film was just fantastic, and it resonated somewhat with my own family history. Back in 1969, while doing a report in middle school, I had to research information regarding my family history. So I asked my paternal grandmother, had she ever heard of the Ku Klux Klan and whether or not she had any experience with them. And she told me that in the early 1920s, she had a friend who was black, and her friend had 2 daughters that were fathered by whites. The daughters had very, very fair features. It could really pass for white. Well, my grandmother said one night there was a knock on the door, and the Klan was there. They wanted my grandmother to identify the location of the friend because they wanted to get those daughters and return them to their proper families. So after a few hours of nonstop interrogation, they became convinced, the Klan became convinced that my grandmother really did not know. It turned out that the mother and her 2 daughters slipped out of town a few days prior because the mother knew something was getting ready to happen. And the mother chose not to confide in my grandmother, knowing that my grandmother had to live there and would be under the pressure and perhaps even have my father or my uncles tortured or whatever. I asked my grandmother, did you recognize any of the Klan members because they were dressed? My grandmother told me that you learned how to read the eyes. If you could read the eyes through the hood, such as the color of the hair of the eyelashes, even the hair of the eyebrow, or even a glint of maybe flecks of gold inside of someone's iris that shows mostly green. She said to learn and memorize those eyes because those are the same eyes you will see somewhere in town, unhooded. So that was some of the words of wisdom that she had given me. So while I'm watching this, now fast forward to this documentary, this made a lot of sense about being hounded down, racial profiling. I myself, I'm a retired military. I have been racially profiled, I don't know how many times in different stores. I have also dealt with being discriminated against when I was overseas. So it's quite an interesting experience. If you've never been profiled, then you may not fully understand it. But years ago, there was a movie based on a book called Black Like Me. And it's a very, very powerful film that or a book for anyone to go through and experience, because until you've been through it, you'll never really fully understand it. So I can really sympathize with the people in Arizona and what they are going through on being targeted just from trying to do the right thing.
Thank you. We have a question in the back as well. Yes. After this, we'll take 1 or 2 more questions.
Thank you. I just had a question. You mentioned that when they took the gentleman or removed him back to Mexico, that he didn't know what he was signing. He signed one type of paperwork instead of the other. Are the documents only in English?
Well, usually there's something that they're supposed to be explained in Spanish. They're not necessarily in Spanish, but supposedly someone. I've heard from clients, though, that the person who read it to me, I really couldn't understand what they were saying. So I think that does happen quite often, that people sign something that they don't really know that they're signing. There are a lot of people who give up rights by signing that they don't realize, and they hurt their case. For example, another reason, if this man hadn't had an expedited order of removal, if he had just come in illegally once and had been here for 15 years without leaving, he does have possibilities. It's when you leave the country and come back again illegally that you trigger some of the bars. And also, if let's say you are in removal proceedings and you get ordered removed, you want to appeal. It's kind of an immigration you can win by losing, because you keep extending the process hoping the law is going to change over the years. But the minute you leave on an order of deportation, you do sacrifice a lot of rights to maybe reopen that case or other possibilities.
Excellent. Did we have a question over here somewhere? Oh, okay, yes, go ahead, sorry.
Is this on? Yes. Okay, my question for each of you is to know exactly what you would like to see done in our country to ameliorate the situation. What would help you in the legal field? What would help you in the border? What would help you, overall, what should be done? What laws should be passed? What direction should we take so that this no longer is a major problem?
Let's start down
Juan,
there.
you want to start? Yes.
Well, I think one of the other myths that was spoken about in the film, and I think that people think across the country that these immigrants are taking away the jobs and services, health, and that it's costing the government money, when in fact there have been various studies, very important studies, that have shown that the immigrants contribute to the economy and have helped the economy grow in a lot of different ways. So I just want to dispel that myth right now, because they are contributing to the economy. What should we do? Again, as I said at the beginning, I think that it's long overdue that there be a humane and just immigration reform bill that covers a lot of different aspects for the people that are living here, have been here, and I think should have a path towards documentation and becoming legal residents of the United States, because they are contributing to the country and to the economy, and they have families here. But there's a lot of different aspects to immigration reform, and I think all of those things need to be seriously considered. You always hear, yeah, but security first. Well, I think security is obviously an aspect to any type of for national defense, but beyond that, the dreamers, you saw the anchor baby situation where they want to repeal like the 14th Amendment or something, which is sort of ridiculous, the extremes that some people will go to here. Again, we need the guest worker program. Humane laws for people that are here, that want to be here to work, that want to be here and contribute to this country and become citizens, and they should be given that chance. This is, like I said at the beginning, our land in a lot of ways was taken away from us, and now we've been made to be immigrants in our own land. So a humane and just immigration reform bill that covers all these different facets.
I don't really want to give my opinion, but I will say that that I think there's a pretty broad consensus right now that there's some major problems with the visas that we have, the visa system that we have, that it's not admitting the people that need to be admitted. There's a lot of even Republican support for more visas for guest workers and visas for students who've been in the U.S. And got an education here. I actually had a conversation. I've had conversations in the last few weeks with Henry Cuellar and Lamar Smith, the congressman, and Smith gave me the same answer that I just gave y'all, is I don't want to give an opinion. I don't know why he wouldn't give me what he was going to support, but he was suggesting that Republicans in the House were going to try to counter with something similar to the DREAM Act that maybe had some more restrictions and possibly some sort of piecemeal legislation that would allow people who are here right now to apply without returning to their home country. But he wouldn't tell me if he would support those measures. So I think there's a pretty, there's a very wide range of people are realizing that the system we have right now is not particularly functional and needs to be changed. But there's probably a pretty tight window ahead of presidential politics heating up next year, but that it would have to get done in.
Well, I think from an educational standpoint, we need to look at what are people afraid of. And when we think of immigration reform, we think about it doesn't work. It's obviously not meeting the needs of the people now. And what are we really afraid of? Are we really afraid that there's a lot of people? Like the lady said, there are too many people here? Are we afraid that they're going to get on Social Security? Are we afraid that they're all going to be on Medicare? Are we afraid that when you go to the hospital, you're not going to be taken care of because it's full of immigrants? What are we really afraid of? And I think that when we look at and be honest with ourselves about and have real dialogue about what we're afraid of and start to tackle those things first, then maybe our legislators will come up with some consensus. But from an educational standpoint, I think I would be very afraid of legislation being passed that would require our educational system to deport or to report illegal immigration. I don't think that educators are in that business. And I don't think they should be. And that's, again, my personal opinion. And I believe that education is for everyone. And I also think that the opportunity for language learners, for years that I've been in the education, and I've worked in elementary, middle schools, high schools, and post-secondary, and we've always called people limited English learners. And when I was in the book business selling textbooks, we used to call them PALs. They were proficient in another language. Whether you were from Cambodia or you were from Mexico, but you were proficient in another language. Europeans, people from all over the world, know 3 or 4 languages by the time they're 18. Why is it so hard to have a second language in this country? A dual language education should be for everyone. In this city, Alamo Heights School District was one of the first school districts in this country that started a dual language program because the parents wanted their children, this was years and years ago, who understood the business of the world and the economy was going to be global. And they wanted their kids to be able to communicate in a global way. And I really believe that the more we encourage our young people to understand that it's not just Mexico, it's the globe, it's the whole world. We're so small. And why do we have to hate? And why do we have to build hatred? And, one of the things to look at is, do the laws we have in effect right now actually encourage this racism, this hatred? That's not what this country was founded on. So it's a hard question to answer, ma'am, because I'm not a legislator, but being peace, bringing harmony, and coming up with the observations and the dialogue to really come up with things that are going to be helpful and not hurtful.
I agree with what everyone has said today, and I really just tend to keep my eyes on the nuts and bolts every day of putting cases together for my clients. I don't dwell on the bigger picture that often, but I do see inconsistencies and contradictions in the law that keep people from being helped by the law that's supposed to help them a lot of times. For example, I had a gentleman in my office today with his son who's a U.S. citizen. The son has petitioned for his parents. Everyone thinks, the anchor baby is going to help you get your papers someday. Well, they can never go. They came into the country illegally. They have to go back to their country to get the visa and go through the process. But when they go there, they trigger the bar for being here illegally by leaving, and they need a qualifying relative to ask for forgiveness for that. But guess what? That U.S. citizen son doesn't do it. It has to be a permanent resident or U.S. citizen spouse or parent. How many people don't have that? So I would just like to see everything made to agree with each other a little bit better, so really it could help the people who need the help and who deserve the help.
Thank you.